Right, welcome back to Sam's Bikes, and this is the 4-month review on the Specialized Genie Shock. In this review, we are looking at what is the Genie, how does it work, how to set it up, how does it feel out in the trails, and how does it compare to some of the other traditional air and coil springs. And before we crack on with that review, a massive shout out to Topeak, who came on as a major sponsor at Sam's Bikes a year ago. I absolutely love all the Topeak products. But because we're talking about suspension today, this is my favorite tool from Topeak for suspension, the Pocket Shock Digital. This bad boy is going to tell you exactly how much pressure you have in your forks or your rear shock, because it's a digital pump, so you can see if you have 81 or 82.5. That's what I want out of suspension. I don't want to know more or less, I want to know exact. And also, it's got the dual valve here, so it minimizes losing any air when you're taking the shock off. Love it, highly recommend it. Check it out, link in the show notes. So first up, what is the new Genie Shock? The Genie is a Specialized invented, patent pending, 2-stage air spring shock, which provides the riders the best of both worlds. Coil-like linear spring rate for the first 70% of the stroke, and a progressive end stroke for bottom out. Now that's the technical definition of the Genie, but let me explain to you riders how I understand it. The Genie has a massive air chamber here that gives you plush-like suspension. It does feel coil-like at the first 70% of the air stroke. And then when you pass the 70%, so the last 30%, it cuts the chamber in two and allows you to progressively ramp up the last 30%. And one of the most interesting things for the Genie for me is you can independently tune the mid-stroke and the bottom out via tokens. And why is that interesting? Let's have a look at an X2 that in the last couple of years has probably been one of the most popular shocks on the market. Now, how we'd go and tune this, or how I tune it, would be I'd go for 30% sag, and I'd go out, set compression and rebound for comfort and how I like it. And then I'd ride, an enduro trail that I'd normally ride, and I'd look for bottom out. If I bottomed it out, I would add a token, which would actually give me more progression and make the bike less plush. So what we're actually doing is we're tuning for like 5 to 10% of the ride. Now with the Genie, we can actually tune the mid-stroke and the bottom out, which I think is a game changer, because we're not riding these big trails all the time. We want our suspension to be plush, and we also want to control bottom out. Now let's talk setup. And I was advised to ride the Genie in the stock configuration, which is one of the orange tokens in the mid-stroke and the 0.2 in the eyelet. And riders, if you know the channel, you know I'm a bit of a suspension geek. When I went out and rode this, I set it at 30% sag, set my compression to like 3 from open, rebound about halfway, and I felt guilty because it was so easy to set up. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know if I needed to add tokens or, it just felt pretty much perfect. A lot like when you're setting up a coil suspension and you get the spring rate correct. Since then, over the last couple of months, I've tried pretty much every setup, filled it with tokens in the mid-stroke, also taken out the bottom out, ridden it with no tokens, and I've gone back to the original setup, so the stock setup, as my preferred sort of everyday riding. So now, most importantly, how does the Genie ride out in the trails? Well, riders, I love my job and I take it really seriously. And I went out with my Levo SL Gen 2 to La Panilla Bike Park for the whole weekend of the initial testing, and I rode the Float X, so the original shock, on the Levo SL for 2 hours, and then I changed over to the Genie. And my first findings, I was recording it all with a GoPro, is how well the rear wheel tracked. It definitely for me felt coil-like, the back wheel was leaving the ground less and I had more traction. Also, definitely, it felt plusher. And I'm also gonna say, it felt like I had more travel, maybe like 10 mil more travel, like 160 at the back. And I noticed that when I did the jump line, which you'll see in slow motion here. That's a pretty big black run, and for a trail bike 160, 150, it's kind of on its edge to if you can do it or not. And I braced my body and I jumped, I did the drops and the jumps, and the bike handled it so well. So it definitely feels like you have more usable travel because, the first part of the travel, the first 30% is a flatter curve. So you have more usable travel, and also how it ramps up at the end you'll see in those drops, it does have like a bottomless feel, and the fact you can tune those tokens. And as I said, I played around for like the last couple of months with all the different options, and I found my sweet spot in the stock setup. So it's fair to say I'm a big fan of the Genie Shock. And I think one of the most standout parts of the Shock is how versatile it makes an already very versatile Levo SL. And what do I mean by that? So we've got the Levo SL here. You can set it up as a park bike, as I did like a few weeks after at La Panilla. Slacken it out, mull it obviously, drop it in the low setting of the flip chip here, take out all the spaces in the mid-stroke, making it more plush, and maybe putting the 1.4 volume toker for the bottom out or leaving the 1.2. And then on the flip side, you can make the Levo SL with the Genie feel like a short travel 29er. So you obviously change it to a 29 in the back, high setting, flip the chip into the steep, so 65 degree, and then with the Genie, put 2 or 3 tokens in the mid-stroke, making it really sit up in its travel, more agile and responsive, maybe have no bottom out tokens or the 0.2 if you are a bit of a jumper. And it is crazy how different those bikes can feel. So you can really have your trail whip it one day and your downhill bike the next. And how does the Genie compare to something like the Float X that comes on the 2024 Levo SLs, or the Ohlins coil, which is coming on the 2025 as an option? Starting off with the Float X, definitely the Genie is better. Definitely it's plusher. You can control your bottom out. I can definitely feel a big difference between the Float X and the Genie. And onto the Ohlins coil, which I have on a few of my e-bikes. Both fantastic shocks. If you want your Levo SL to feel like, you know, a trail duro / mini enduro bike, then the Genie or the coil are great options. But if you want your Levo SL to be a bit more versatile, you know, make it feel like a trail whip it one day, enduro bike the next, then the Genie is definitely a better option. And right now, you can get the Genie on the Levo SL Gen 2 2025 or the Stumpy 15. And right, it's down to the conclusion. I think Specialized have knocked it out of the park with the Genie. Fantastic idea, implemented very well. Kicking myself, I didn't think of it myself. Such a simple idea when you break it down, and done very well. I think we're going to see this platform on loads more bikes coming in the future. And riders, like always, if you have any questions, hit me up in the comments, and you stay safe out there, and we're going to see you soon.